Welcome back to the Speaking and Communicating podcast. My name is Roberta, and today I have Laura Barker. She is a coach. She spent more than 20 years in human resources for big corporations in Toronto, and she's here to talk to us about interview skills, communication, and interpersonal skills at work, and what is it that we can do to be not only expert communicators in the workplace, but in our personal lives as well. And before I go any further, help me welcome Laura. Hi, Laura.
Hi, Roberta. I'm excited to be here.
Good to have you here. I'm so glad we're finally able to speak.
Yeah, me too.
So before we talk about what's currently happening now, especially with the pandemic, I'd like you to take us back to your first more or less 20 years experience as a human resources professional. What are some of the things that you noticed when it comes to work environments and work interactions?
I think over the past 20 years, one of the big things that's happened is overall much less formality in the workplace. I would say that when I started in HR in the 90s, people for the most part would dress up for work as a simple example, like just using that as a simple example. People would dress up for work. People were in the office every day. I did not know a single person who worked from home when I was starting out in the 90s. So you fast forward that to today, and I know people, we used to use the term telecommuting. That was the term for people working from home, but even that was rare. It has become more and more popular. And of course, with the pandemic, there's been that huge shift to working from home.
Right. And same as me, I said my first job was in 1995, back in corporate. I find that also when it comes to the differences between now and that era, and this is something that I sometimes coach people on, is not just the formality of the dressing, but the formality of the lingo, the business
Correct.
lingo, right?
Yes.
What kind, when you used to write letters, correspondence to clients or to your colleagues, how did you address those labeled letters compared to how they're written today?
Yeah, they were much more formal. And more often than not, I might type it out on a computer, but I would still be printing it and it would be mailed to the person. And yes, we did use email, of course, but I think as we moved more digitally, things became less formal. So, from writing a letter to using emails and then to texting, all these different formats have changed how we communicate with each other.
That is so true. For instance, we used to say, hello, Laura. Now we say hi.
Correct. And yes, that's true.
If I'm sending you a picture, back then we used to say, attached, please find here with the photo. We used to say photo, the photo as per our telephonic conversation. There was much telephone, right? Now, here's the pic.
So true. Oh my gosh.
That's so true. Different.
Yeah. And there's something that reminded me of my first job. I was recruiting. I worked at a pharmaceutical company and I was recruiting. And so I was on the phone all day long. I was doing the phone interviews. I was doing reference checks. And people, it's interesting because people were used to phone conversations all the time. I was used to getting interrupted all the time with a phone call, no matter what I was doing.
Yeah.
And when I moved that to my later HR career, working in a corporate office, no one used the phone. I mean, it was rare to get a phone call. Almost all conversations were done via email.
Yes,
or
intranet.
Or they'd set up a meeting to have a discussion if they wanted to do it face-to-face. But the phone was the least used communication medium.
That's right.
Yeah.
And what have you found? So just before, we're going to come to your coaching business now, just before you ended your human resources career, did you find that, speaking of this formal communication, because now we have texting language, the abbreviations half the time I have to Google what people are saying to me, all these HBDs and WYPs.
Yes.
I have to Google it because I have no idea. So you have executives our age now,
Mhm. Mhm.
and they're hiring graduates who come with texting language.
Mhm. Mhm.
Have you noticed if there's any breakdown in communication because of that, or is everything just smooth sailing?
No, there's definitely communication styles for each generation of the workplace and preferred mediums. So the boomers who are older than us, what they want is they don't want to do pre-reading. They want to go into a meeting and talk about it there.
Mm.
That to them is the way they communicate. It's through the medium of the meeting. That's where the talking happens and the thinking, the brainstorming. Gen X wants a PowerPoint. Gen X wants to have the pre-reading so that you come to the meeting to come to a meeting and millennials like the sidebar conversations in the meeting. So they'll often try talking to the person beside them as opposed to bringing in or speaking to the lead facilitator of the meeting. So it's important to understand these different styles of communication because they impact our understanding of what came out of a meeting, as an example.
And also of each generation, because if you our generation or the one before us, and you're the executive, and the millennials are having their side conversation, you're going to feel disrespected.
Correct. Yes. Yes.
Which might not be a good look for them in the long run. So how do we bridge that gap? If you have any idea, what is it that we can do so that the older generation doesn't feel like these millennials are disrespectful? Everything is here and they're having their side conversation.
It's so simple in that it really comes down to communication. I mean, how powerful is it for a boomer to know that when a millennial is doing a sidebar conversation, they're not intending to be disrespectful. That is their mode of communication. And for me as a Gen Xer who likes to come to a meeting with a PowerPoint and to make decisions, it is helpful for me to understand that, when you go to a meeting with a boomer, they're not going to do the pre-reading. Of course, there's exceptions to every rules. I'm not trying to say
we're just working with the law of averages.
Yeah, exactly. But it's so helpful to understand that. And then I don't feel so frustrated that I'm wasting time in the meeting explaining something to a boomer because I don't feel as a Gen Xer that they've done their work ahead of time.
Right. And speaking of PowerPoint presentations, what's your style? Do you write the entire novel of what you're going to speak about, or are you a bullet point type?
Oh my gosh, Roberta, that has changed over time. That's another thing that's changed in the last 20 years. We've become so much more visual. So as I've gotten older and more experienced, particularly in HR, I've learned that what people remember are the short bullet points, the visual images, and then I can talk it up when I'm there. But when I have too much verbiage on the screen, I lose my audience.
That is so true. That's what I advise people on. I always recommend that. I say, what you're going to talk about anyway. Your slides are going to be your sticky note. Just bullet points, each bullet point about 2 or 3 words, just to remind you what you're going to talk. But if you read the entire novel on the slide, I'm not going to look at Laura. I'm going to be reading. And I read much faster. So by the time you are done reading your slide, you've lost me. I'm already thinking of something else.
Yes.
So I don't recommend novels either. Always recommend to people that please just have quick bullet points, more images, and talk through them exactly like you said. That works way better than writing an entire story.
And you know what? The other thing, Roberta, I'm thinking of my most recent job where we had people from all over the world. And I had to do health and safety training. A lot of them, English is their second, third, fourth language. So the visual images really help when the language skills aren't necessarily that they're completely fluent. So when I can do a visual image of explaining a concept in health and safety, it goes much farther than writing a whole bunch of words that they may or may not understand.
That is so true. We think in pictures. I spent almost a decade in South Korea teaching English,
Yeah.
and that also runs parallel to when you explain a concept. Let's say you're in IT, because a lot of my clients are tech people who are brilliant. They just don't know how to present to their potential clients to say, hey, my brilliant innovation is going to help you take your company to the next level. Because we don't all speak tech, right?
Yeah.
So instead of all this programming language and all the tech lingo that the Amazon directors are not going to understand, you can simplify it by having a picture to explain how they are going to benefit from your program.
Yeah.
You can have a graph that shows them, okay, if you don't have my program, this is how far your company can go. But if you enlist my program, this is how far we can take it, because these are the clients who've used it and this is their growth chart. Things like that. Pictures, graphs, statistics, and not too much. Just for people to they understand that way better than tech lingo, especially if they're not technologically advanced people. So pictures will always do the trick. So what made you get started on your own company after that many years in human resources?
Well, I had worked in lots of industries, small companies and really big companies. I'm talking like 200,000 people. So, but I've also worked in small companies of 10 people, and there are pros and cons to big and small companies. And it's fun to learn different industries. I worked in hospitality, hotels for many years, which is a fun industry, let's face it.
Not fun.
But I think that I had reached a point where I just wasn't satisfied with HR anymore. I had changed. I think the HR function has changed in the last 20 plus years. And I was ready for something different. So I did try project management, thinking, if I shift career focus, I loved doing projects when I worked in HR. That was fun. That's why I thought I'd do project management. But when I did it every day, I realized, no, that's actually not what I want to do.
What was the thing? When I worked in consulting engineering companies, I was a project manager. What did you feel did not meet your expectations in project management?
Yeah, I would say the thing with project management that I did not know going in is that project managers have all the responsibility without the authority. So sometimes that experience is, I need to get X implemented by X date.
Yes.
And I need to enlist the support of IT, of marketing, accounting, the back end. There's all these different teams behind the scenes.
You're like a producer.
Yeah. And you have to coordinate all that, like a conductor, you're coordinating all that. And sometimes it is time bound. That's the nature of project management. I can't move ahead with X until that's done. So then it's chasing people. Not all it's not all technical stuff. A lot of this is people stuff, right? It's
some of it is just pure administration, but it has to be part of the final product. Yes.
Correct. Yeah. So I think I didn't know that going in. I think I just knew it intellectually, but when I did it day in and day out, it was a different experience. Yeah.
It reminds me of my project management days. And the thing is, like you said, when it's not, you have there was, I don't know if they still have it, Microsoft projects.
Yeah.
Where for each task, you will have a deadline of when you should do that by. And
correct.
In Microsoft project, it's shaded with a black, the black squares and, how far we should take this. And when there's one weakest link that's not doing what they should by that time, a lot of other things get affected.
Yes. And it can be stressful because project management is so time bound.
It is.
Yeah. And ultimately my customer needs something implemented. And they don't care. They don't care that I can't get such and such team behind the scenes
And it's not their
organized.
problem. They
Yeah.
shouldn't. It's not
Yep.
their problem.
No, it's not. It's mine.
They're paying you
Yeah.
to deliver the product on
Yeah.
time.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. And
Mm-hmm.
so when you left human resources
Yeah.
and you started your coaching business,
Mm-hmm.
what have you realized are some of the, first of all, when did you start? And what have you realized are some of the common patterns when it comes
Mm-hmm.
to careers at the moment?
Yeah. So what I realized is what I was drawn to is people. And that probably shouldn't surprise you because I'm in HR, but
Right.
I love people. I love understanding how they tick. I love understanding what motivates them. And really ultimately what I found and what I want everyone to find is to feel that their life has purpose. And in this day and age, what's happened is we are so identified by what we do
True.
that understanding what our career is, it's not just a nice thing to do. It's integral to feeling aligned with who we are.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I decided to focus on career coaching with my background in HR and because of what I just described to you. And the people that I'm seeing in general, the themes that are coming out are around the Great Resignation.
Right.
That's a common one.
Mm-hmm.
That the pandemic has forced a reckoning in terms of trying to figure out who they are and what they want.
Which they probably never thought of until they were forced to work from home.
Yeah, I think that working from home has led to so many people. For me, it's like a ball of yarn. Like it's like this whole work and family and home life. It's all tangled up, all tangled up.
Mm.
And I think there's been a lot of frustration uh, and they've been because people have been had to stay inside for extended periods of time. It's forced them to think about, am I really happy doing this? Why am I doing this? Because pay or your salary is only going to take you so far. And I do know from working in HR for so many years that uh, pay, I'm not saying it's not important, but in the end, that's not why people leave jobs. So, and the number one reason is communication and relationship with the supervisor is actually the number one reason.
Is that so?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, I know my last corporate job before
Mm.
moving countries it lasted 6 months, which was the shortest I've been in a job. But the last month I was physically sick in my stomach. Each morning when I woke up thinking about going to work, and they were paying me the highest salary I'd ever received since graduating. But that's how miserable I was. I
Yeah.
waited for payday, and when I realized my money's in, I was done. I left that very day. I didn't serve notice. I was so done. So
Yes.
yes, from that experience, I realized that no matter how high your salary, if you are unhappy, you're not going to stay.
No, no, you won't. And the other thing, I used to actually be just, I specialized in compensation for a number of years. And
Mhm.
so what would happen is people would come to me when people would complain about their pay and say, I need to give so-and-so an extra, whatever it was, 10,000, 20,000, because I can't afford to lose her or him right now.
Right.
And what I learned time and again is when you give that person the money, they still leave. They still leave.
So the money is not the problem.
Yeah. So you might keep them for 6 months, a year, but they leave. Because there's other factors at play that they're not talking about, and they're using money as the thing to focus on, something tangible to focus on. And so that's why it doesn't satisfy over a period of time.
When you were talking about this point earlier, you touched on communication skills. Tell us more about that.
So in terms of communication skills, I think that what I see happening is Overall, I think over the pandemic, I have seen somewhat of a corseting. I hate to say it, but I have seen somewhat of a corseting of communication skills. I think that it is through that regular interaction with people that we communication skills get better through practice,
Yep.
through that general exchange. Seriously, like people talk about it all the time, but that water cooler conversation about what'd you do on the weekend, you know, and it sounds silly, and yet those are the skills that keep you connected with others and help you to improve your communication skills. And in this day and age, after 2+ years of COVID and Zoom meetings for all of us coming out our ears, we don't have at the beginning of meetings that same kind of water cooler talk, because with Zoom, if I'm talking, you can't, or if you talk and I talk at the same time, as you know, you can't hear anything. It cancels each other out.
Whoever's going to listen to those conversations, they're going to hear those parts. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, the one-on-one conversations have changed and the group conversations have changed. And I also know from HR that hiring people during the pandemic, it was harder to get them integrated into the organization, because they couldn't do, you know, in my last HR job, we would have, because as I mentioned to you, we had people from around the world. So we would do monthly lunches where people would host and the company would pay for food from their home country. So either they would make their own food or they would bring food in. They'd order it from a Turkish restaurant, for example, bring the food in. We all got a chance to try these different foods from around the world. And it's fun. Like it's simple, but it was fun and a great way to communicate, to learn about language and culture through an easy way, because food is something we can all relate to.
That is amazing. So when it comes to community, and we both have been project managers.
Yeah.
I don't know if in your experience, you realize how important it is, because you're going to work with people who have different skill sets that all need to come to this project for it to be complete. You know, the engineer, the urban planner, the transportation plan. Everybody, you need to be able to work with different personalities, different professions in order to bring this together. So if you lack on communication skills, what's the likelihood you're going to have a managerial or directorial position if you don't know how to work with people?
Oh, huge, because bottom line is, for a project to succeed, you need everyone on side with you. So how do you do that? Well, the truth is, you can't just have one communication style. You have to meet people where they're at. Exactly. And, you know, if I'm talking to an engineer, what I know is based on my experience, I'm going to be given bullet points. I'm going to keep this very matter of fact, and I will likely do a follow-up via email with those bullet points stated, because that would be, it may be a preferred communication style. Now, that depends on the person. You get to know their personalities and what works with one person versus another. If I'm working with a salesperson, it's going to be talking, right? Like that's going to be the way that person is going to want to. So when you're talking about people presenting a potential project, talking about features and benefits, or why an IT product should come to market, you're going to be presenting to people who like the verbal, who want to hear people talking a lot. They're not necessarily going to be impressed by a sheet with full of technical details, but they will be impressed if you can talk to them about it. Because sometimes when you're on the other side of it and you're not that technically inclined, it's kind of scary, because you feel like you might not really fully understand it. And sometimes,
if you don't fully understand what they are selling, are you going to buy it?
Exactly. And some people might be scared to ask because they don't want to look stupid. So
yeah, no matter how many times our teachers told us to ask the stupid questions, we're still not courageous enough to do so.
Well, I could tell you I love that idea, but in the real world, not everyone has that courage, Roberta, to be straightforward about it and say, I'm sorry, I don't understand. Can you explain that to me?
I recently learned something, which is the golden rule says treat people the way you want to be treated.
Mhm.
But the platinum rule is treat people how they want to be treated.
Oh my gosh.
And the same applies to communication, just like you said.
Mhm.
Communicate to people the way they want to be communicated to,
Yeah.
in their communication style. That's when you're going to get buy-in and get them to go with you on whatever journey you need them to.
Yeah. And that varies by the role of the person. It could also be age and stage of life. You and I talked earlier, sometimes with an older person in the workforce, a phone call might be preferred to explain what's going on. If I'm dealing with someone really young in the workplace, a Gen Z employee, I will just do a text message. That's going to be the
because
preferred
that's what they
communication.
prefer.
Yeah.
Earlier, you spoke about the fact that you've worked in both big companies and small companies. What was one or two differences that you noticed?
Yeah, I think that in big companies, what I liked about it was that's where I did the compensation job, for example. So it's such a big company that I could do a dedicated role within the HR function and dive really deep and really understand compensation, benefits. Nowadays, they call it total rewards, but you could get really deep into that subject matter. When I've worked at small companies as the HR director, I'm wearing every hat.
Right.
So I'm doing compensation, benefits, performance management, recruitment, terminations, the whole shebang. I'm doing all of it. And in the end, I love that. I loved being there from the beginning to the end, the whole employee life cycle. For me, I like having my finger in many pies. And that's my own style. So, when I'm mentoring people who are coming into HR, for example, one of the things I think they need to consider is, what do I actually want? Do I want to be in a big company? Meaning I want to perhaps specialize in a certain area? Or do I really want to be more of a generalist and learn lots of different things, which you can get in a small company? Sorry.
Carry on. Go ahead.
No.
That was my experience too. My first job, 5 years, big company. So I only did the transportation planning and economics job that I was hired to do.
Yeah.
But then when I worked for a small company, you have your hands on many different platforms because they don't have a Laura who just does HR. And so I remember for the first time we were filling out the tax forms that then will submit to my boss, and then he will submit it to the tax company that's going to do the company's taxes and our personal taxes, and then send it to the taxman back home. So I had never seen that or done that in the big company because they have dedicated HR people. And another thing that I learned, especially in my first job as well, was what do you think of people who say, let's say, for instance, we were bidding for a project and you need to make 10 copies of a company profile and the proposal, etc. What do you think of people who would say, oh, I went to Harvard, I don't do photocopies?
Yeah, it makes me sad because that's how you learn. It is through, we can all choose our attitudes. And, for that Harvard person who doesn't want to do the fax machine or some sort of menial, what you're really saying is some sort of menial job that they feel is beneath them. We can choose how we want to respond to that. And in the end, that's how you learn. When you're doing that photocopying, read what that's about. Ask questions about it, because that's the kind of stuff that you're never going to learn in school. And you may not even hear about in office conversations, but when you read that stuff and you could ask so and so about it, that's how you learn to move to the next level. It's actually really advantageous to do so.
It is, because have you realized, having your own company, that it's like a whole production? All the behind the scenes stuff would be the stuff that if you didn't have the best of attitudes when you were working in corporate and said, oh, I only do my job description, is the stuff that you weren't assigned to do. But if you were willing to do that and learn that, when you start having your own company, those are the things that you do. You learn the full picture of what goes on behind the scenes,
Oh,
which
yes.
benefits you.
Yes. And, that's the thing in terms of moving up the ladder, the career ladder, ultimately, your skills are only going to take you so far. I can say this with honesty after 20 plus years of HR, that you'll get to a certain level with skills, technical skills, but really what moves you ahead, it is those soft skills. It is knowing how to communicate. It is understanding how all the different aspects of the organization are run and how they work together. That's what makes the difference.
The entire production.
Yeah.
So don't be only stuck on your job description.
No, because the way you're going to learn and the way you're going to grow is by experiencing all sorts of other things. So that's the advantage of a small company, is, having your finger in many pies.
Right. And then when it comes to interviews, since you're a career coach, what have you noticed do people, the interview panel, do they only focus on the skills and what you graduated with from Stanford, or do you also sort of study the person's personality?
Yeah.
And see if it's going to merge with the company's environment?
That's a great question. And I actually think that the way the interviews happen depends on the type of company you want to work at. And what I mean by that is if you're applying for a big company like a Google or an Apple, et cetera, they've got a whole system in place in terms of what they're looking for. And you can Google it to find out what their system is. But what I would say is, and I say this also because I've done it in different ways over the last 20 plus years. What I've learned works best is if my hiring manager focuses on some of the technical things that need to get done, as well as talking about if they're going to be managing others, their experience with managing others, and talking about career growth. If they can focus on that, what I can do is what we call behavioral interviewing, which is past behavior predicts future behavior.
Right.
So going through examples, tell me a time when, and this is the standard HR question, but tell me a time when. The reason they're asking you that question is because more often than not, we work on autopilot and we tend to do the same behaviors again and again.
So that means in a similar situation in this company, that's how you're going to act.
Yeah. And if I'm seeing some red flags, I will make a note of that with the hiring manager. But if I'm not, I'm thrilled. Yes.
Your job is done. We hired someone. Yeah. So before we conclude, Laura, what will give us maybe 2 or 3 things that are very important in order for you to start mastering when it comes to communication, soft and interpersonal skills at work? What do you want people to take note of?
I heard a quotation from the Dalai Lama that I think is gorgeous. So I would love to share it and I don't want to say it wrong, so I'm going to read it. It's really short.
Yeah.
He said, "When you talk, you're only repeating what you already know." And I say this to you. I say this to you and to myself, to all of us, that I think sometimes we are in a society that likes to talk, but doesn't always listen. And the most effective communication requires both listening and speaking. I think it's like, a balance. And I think right now talking weighs more than listening. And I think the best setup is when there's a bit more balance.
2 ears and 1 mouth, use in proportion.
Yeah. Yes.
Because when you talk, you already know the material. So if you listen, you're going to learn more.
And again, both of these statements work because, again, talking about communication styles, what lands for one person doesn't land for another. So it's meeting people where they're at. Sometimes we're saying the same concepts in 3 different ways, because one of them will connect with the listener.
Mm. What can you say about an employee who feels unheard by their supervisor? Is there any advice for them?
So what usually happens is they come to talk to me about it because they're not happy that their supervisor's not listening. So what I will do is I will listen to them to find out what's going on and ask them, what is the outcome that you're looking for? Because more often than not, they just don't feel heard. And it's not even that they need that answer right away, but by helping them see that they've been listened to, I can help facilitate that conversation then with the supervisor. So typically, if I had that conversation with the employee who didn't feel listened to, I found out what the situation is and what the outcome is that they're looking for, I would sit down with the supervisor. I'd be the facilitator.
Mhm.
I have done this many times in my life. I would sit down with the supervisor as well and say, this is what Jane is saying. Jane, is there anything you want to add that I haven't explained here? And I will have also talked to the supervisor, which I should have mentioned. I would have talked to the supervisor separately and explained, supervisor, Jane, this is what the supervisor is telling me. Do you understand what's going on? Do you have any questions about it? And then usually there's some defensiveness that happens on one or both parts. And to push past that, what helps, I find, is to focus on the outcome. So then it becomes less about blame. That's how the conversation can move forward a bit easier.
Focus on the outcome, focus on the goal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Laura, this has been wonderful. And before we go, please tell us where anyone can get more of your career coaching. What's your social media?
So thank you, Roberta. I have a website. It's really easy. It's www.laurabarkercoaching.com. I've created a YouTube channel, also Laura Barker Coaching, where I do a weekly blog. So if you'd like to sign up, you can sign up by going to my website. But what I also do is video versions of the blog, because I have learned that some people are visual learners. I like to read myself. So I like to read blogs, but I know some people like to watch. That's why I did the video, and I also do an audio version because some people like to listen when they're in their car. So I do an audio version as well.
LauraBarkerCoaching.com. I absolutely love that you explained that, because I remember growing up that, you'd have a book version of something and you'll have a movie version, and you were actually ashamed for liking the movie version. You don't want to read.
Yeah, but it's so different now. Like, so I'm on LinkedIn, and what I find is people want to watch the video.
Everybody's different, and it's okay.
Yeah, I know. It's the reminder that just because I have a certain learning style, it doesn't mean everyone else does. Everyone's got their own style. So meet them where they're at.
Laura Barker, thank you so much for being here today. You've shared some real nuggets, and especially with those who are still looking for guidance in their careers, this has been invaluable. Appreciate you being here.
Thanks, Roberta. I appreciate it.